Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we are thrilled to be your hosts for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to have a friendly chat with some amazing people so we can help normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. Our guest today is Joanne Steen. Joanne is the founder of Grief Solutions, a training company that offers practical training and resources on grief, loss, and resilience to bereavement care providers. Joanne has worked with more than 40 diverse organizations. Her clients have included the U.S. Department of Defense, the Canadian Military Forces, Army Survivor Outreach Services, and Navy Gold Star Program, plus a host of federal, state, corporate, and nonprofit organizations. Joanne holds a master's in counseling from Old Dominion University and a bachelor's in engineering from Rutgers University. Honors and awards include the 2010 Chairman's Award, Military Officers Association of America, 2009 Alumni Fellow, Old Dominion University, Darden College of Education and Professional Studies, and 2007 Distinguished Author of the Year, United States Naval Institute. Joanne is the author of We Regret to Inform You, a survival guide for Gold Star parents and those who support them. She is co-author of the award-winning Military Widow, a survival guide. Joanne is also a contributing author to numerous works on traumatic grief and military loss. Joanne, we are delighted to have you as a guest on our show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hi, Joanne. Before we get into your work, would you be kind enough to share with our audience your story that got you here?
Of course. In hindsight, it's always interesting to go back and look at the life's twists and turns. But in hindsight, now looking back, I was once a woman who had it all. I was in my very early 30s. I was married to a Navy pilot. We went together like peanut butter and jelly. You know, we were both good separately, but together we just created something really good. So I was married to Ken. I had a tremendous career in engineering, and I was actually in a position which was another challenge, and the career was going well. And we were about to move into a house, start a family, and I just had it all. And then on a Friday afternoon, prior to Father's Day weekend, all that came crashing down when my husband, who flew helicopters for the Navy, was coming back from a training hop, coming into Norfolk, and the helicopter exploded in midair and crashed. The remnants of it crashed into the Chesapeake Bay and Lynnhaven River. We lost a crew of 7 that day. And all of a sudden, everything that I valued and cherished, the life I loved and cherished, was gone.
Wow. So how did your path, how do you see that creating your path? Because you were in a very different career. You weren't a writer. You weren't these things that you are today.
No, not in the least bit. In fact, if you had said to me that I was going to write books, I would have probably at that time told you that the only thing I had written to date was probably back in college when I had to write lab reports for TAs, for teaching assistants. It was a time in my life which I think I could either have been probably legitimately gone crazy, or somehow survived, and survival instincts was obviously with me. Because the year was 1992, so it was really some time ago. But my father had died just a few weeks before my husband was killed, and then I was assaulted a few weeks afterwards. So in a period of like 3-4 months, everything in my life was taken away from me. Trust, love, everything, the safety of parents was all gone. And I don't know how I did it. I know I somehow moved forward. I guess I did it. I I did it well enough to say I'm here, and it was a significant and life-changing impact. I did counseling. I was a reader, and so I grabbed every grief book I could. And then I also reached out. And when reaching out, I found that there was no really solid, in this case, survivor-provided resources for military loss. Bonnie Carroll's husband was killed the same year my husband was. In hindsight, I went ahead and we started gathering widows together in this Norfolk, Virginia area, military widows, and it was just for survival. And from there, I was fortunate to be working for the Navy, for the Marine Corps, which did have a motto of join the Navy and see the world. And so I had grabbed every opportunity to train overseas and to travel to other places. So I didn't have to be home, you know. And I had to be on in the seminars that I was a part of. But at home, then I could let my guard down a little bit, and you make it. I don't know. I don't want to even go back and figure out how I made it. I just know that I did, from a variety of things. Some worked, some didn't work. And then after about 7, 8, maybe 9 years, I'd finally burned myself out, and I left the engineering career. Most people thought I was crazy, and especially when I told them I was going into counseling. And so I thought, well, I guess I picked the right field then. You know, I went to grad school, and basically just studied as much as I could about traumatic loss and all the impacts to that, and just to continue to learn what we were dealing with, because that little group of widows and widowers that we didn't fit the model, the civilian model for what was going on. You know, and people would tell us things and they think, well, you don't understand. And here's for instance, when you say you don't understand, I never realized until I lost my first husband how much the military is in both the news cycles and also in the entertainment industry. Yeah. And in so doing, you would either have snippets of stories in the news, and which are news items, and very often they're sensationalized. You get that little snippet, or you see them in the film industry and the entertainment industry. And you know, Hollywood does a very nice job of presenting some drama and trauma. The families embrace each other and they fall on the floor when they're told the news. That doesn't happen. You know, it's a sudden traumatic loss, and it's a notification process that is a trauma. Okay, and then they tie it all up, and then by the end of the show, you know, they're watching the sunrise for a better tomorrow or something like that. Military loss and Gold Star grief is complicated, complex, and it's just plain messy. Yeah. Okay? And it has a long shelf life.
So can you talk about that a little bit, just your work, since you then found yourself on the other side, as opposed to becoming that person who is educating people about this and providing care and support. Tell us a little bit about your work there and what you've discovered and learned, and what's important for folks to know.
When I graduated from school, from grad school, I went and I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and I thought that I would really kind of focus on that. And I was one that very often just jumped into the deep end of the pool, you know, in the things that I do. And then 9/11 happened, and I grew up right outside of New York City. And for me, that was a significant personal traumatic event. And so I left the hospital and teamed up with another military spouse to write the book that I wanted when my first husband was killed, and the book that wasn't the book that I was going to reach for at 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, and that was going to explain to me why my husband's military unit didn't want me around. Yeah. Stuff like that. So we wrote the book, and then when it came out, I was fortunate to pick up. I was fortunate to pick up some support, sponsorship, and I went back this time to teaching and training. And my thought process was like, I can go into direct counseling and I could help a lot of people in one-on-one situations or group situations, or I can help those that help them and provide the type of knowledge and understanding and skills that these counselors need, that these people need when they were going to come in contact with people like myself. Okay,
Right.
because I was a handful as a widow. There's no doubt about it, you know. And
Right.
I, casualty officer, I'm sure, probably ended up talking to the chaplain or ended up being an alcoholic or in therapy. I was a handful, you know. And so I found this was, and it hit upon that purpose that you have, where you take something that is just so devastating, and you see this a lot. You see this with alcoholics, with with people who want to give back that the transformational post-traumatic growth that you have, where you want to make it better for somebody else, and you want to feel like you don't do it for your loved one. I did it for me. Okay,
Yeah.
this was mine. I own this. I didn't say, oh, Ken would want me to do this. I said, this was mine. This was mine. I owned it. And I was going to be able to help these people, to educate them, so that the next time either a counselor was sitting with a widow, or you were part of the casualty team that was knocking on the door in terms of what skill set do you need? What do you need to know? I wanted to be the one who helped provide them with that, to make them better at doing their job, because the job is so important.
Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing and very inspirational. So, talk about your writing about widows, the military widows.
Right. The military widow book was something that we delved into it. We had being the good engineer at heart, I had a plan. Okay, so we had a mission statement. We knew what we wanted to include. We knew that we wanted it to be comprehensive, both from the enlisted population, also the officer corps. We knew we wanted to cover all 5 service branches, including the Coast Guard, and we knew that what we wanted it to be was conversational. We wanted somebody to pick it up, and we wanted them to read it and say, "Hey, I did that. Well, yeah, I did that too." And so we kind of overdid it a little bit with the literature search and with research and interviews and things like this. But I could share with you that kind of the ones who summed it up the best were our Canadian allies, and the widows up there. Just very recently, they said they consider it the manual. This was the manual. So not only did we explain in it why you do some of the things that you do, but things like, what do you do when you're a military spouse and you're accustomed to moving every couple of years, and the military tells you where to move? What do you do now? How do you do that? Or what do you do when you have significant secondary losses, such as you lose your military community, you lose a way of life, you lose a set of friends, you lose that life that you were so a part of. What do you do then? How do you go about dealing with that? And there's still things that come across. And the thing I was most unprepared for with widowhood, military widowhood, was the fact that I was going to lose my set of friends that I had, because I had, even though they were supportive of me through the funeral, through all 7 funerals, through the memorials, et cetera, when you got right down to it, they needed to take a step back, because what they needed to do was they needed to recharge their own body, mind, and spirit. And they needed now to focus on what they do. And in the process of war fighting or of training to war, there really isn't room for living, breathing reminders. I was their worst nightmare.
Yeah.
So,
You're right. You were the thing that the people worry about, that would be me, right?
Well, interestingly enough, you don't worry about it, and people would come up to me, especially during the Iraq and Afghanistan war, and they would say stuff like, "We know you have this book out, but we don't want to talk about it because we don't want to introduce the jinx factor." Okay, and I got that. I really got that. But I think one of the most poignant things I saw, and I worked a lot with the National Guard, which is truly, I give our National Guard such credit, our citizen soldiers, was I was talking at a National Guard conference, and an officer came up and said, would you sign this book for me? He said, to my wife. And I'm like, okay, and tell me more. And he said, I'm going to have you sign this book, and I'm going to put it away. And this is going to be part of if you're reading this letter, look for this book.
Wow.
And so, I mean, picture
Powerful.
the love there. Picture the love that was there. Those are the types of things that stick with you, that they stick with you. And he goes, I hope that one day, he said, I can throw this book away. He goes, don't be offended. I said, no, I got it. I got it completely.
Right.
But he was putting it away for his wife so that if that happened, then he would leave her with something.
She would have a resource. Hearing you talk, it's when it comes to even just grief support for people, there's a couple of things. People certainly need to be validated, and they need to know they're not alone.
Right.
But that only helps to a certain point. Beyond that point, just practical guide of, I've heard so many people who say, yeah, I need to be validated, but I also need to understand, like, what do I do? How do I sort through this? What are the things that are coming? Even just the practical things that have to be taken care of as a result of.
I wish I knew about, like, the military, about how they didn't do it intentionally, how they just needed to withdraw from me. That was huge. But the other thing I wish I knew was how I was going to be bombarded, with reminders. And it's things that you wouldn't. I remember a widow called me up once, and she said, when does this end? And she said, I took my kid to see, like, a hockey game or something. She said, and they started by playing the Star Spangled Banner. She goes, and I cried.
Right.
When does this end? And, and I didn't answer that question because that will always be a reminder for her.
Right.
Or I've asked audiences, well, how many times have you seen a flag flying someplace and, and it's basically stopped you short, and they said, yeah, this is it. That becomes personal reminders, and it's personal. It's not only a personal reminder, but it's also a personal connection that you have. Like, military families, in the business, there's never a generalization where you can say everybody does like this, but the majority of them, the best you could say is that when you lose someone in the line of duty, what happens is that you have this really personal connection with America. And you don't want to see America harmed. You don't want to see America attacked. You don't even want to see America in a position where this virus, has taken over. And there was, I was doing some stuff with a Facebook group relative to the pandemic, and this military mom, she lost a son, said, it breaks my heart. She said that this country the country my son died for is disintegrating in front of my face.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something you said. So my father was military. And although he didn't die of any military-related causes, and he lived to be an old man of a ripe age, every time I see a flag, or every time I see, someone with the Pledge of Allegiance, I get teary-eyed. It's a trigger.
It is. It is a trigger. It's one I wish I knew about. I wish I knew why when you're walking through an airport and you see someone in uniform that you turn around and you watch them, and I
buy them coffee. I pick up their bill, whatever I can do.
Yeah, and it's these types of things where you just feel you feel the connection to country. And it doesn't matter. The interesting thing is it doesn't matter how your loved one died. Obviously we think, okay, here's somebody who has died in combat, because that's what we see as being the ultimate sacrifice, and it is. Okay, but since 9/11, only about 30% of our service members have died in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. The remaining 70% have died outside of what they call a theater of operations, a combat theater of operations.
Yeah.
And they die on other military operations. Okay, they die on classified missions you don't hear about. They die in fires. They die in crashes. They die in the name of operational readiness, of training. Because America, when they're needed, America wants their service members to be operationally ready.
Right. And they died. There's a lot of a lot of military people who have served in the military die even just from the wear and tear that being part of the military has on your body and even on your mind. You know, we have a lot of military people now who die from suicide. You know, and from a lot of the issues related to their service to this country. That's a sacrifice given to our country. Yeah.
And that ties into, you're so right on with that, because that ties into the fact that when you have a military death, sometimes as we talk about finding meaning in the death and or finding purpose in it, sometimes the death makes no sense to you. You know, it's not a combat death. You're not going to see it on SEAL Team 6, whatever that show is. But what you're going to find, it's a challenge then for survivors to find that meaning, perhaps not in the death itself, but in the purpose that these men and women, that they were the 0.5% that volunteered, in a post 9/11 environment to serve their country.
Right.
It's about purpose. I mean, I remember I was asked one time, and they said, well, how is serving in the military, let's say, different than working for a big corporation? That's an interesting question, you know. And I said, I've never served, but I've spent all this time in a very close-knit environment, particularly the years that I taught. And I said, but I have worked for General Motors. I said, and in working for General Motors, it's a big corporation. They provide automobiles. I said, and you're very committed for in your job of what we did. I was in engineering. I said, but General Motors never asked me, to basically put my life on the line for them.
No.
And, and that's sort of the difference, because yes, you would work hard, you'd be in a position where, you really want to do well, but nobody ever asked me to die for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Well, Joanne, we're actually running short on time, but before, it's been a wonderful conversation. Before we end our time, a lot of people who are watching these episodes want to know how they can connect with our guests, and I wonder how people might connect with you and with your work by listening in.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You can go to griefsolutions.net. It's all one word, www.griefsolutions.net. And you could find out more about some of the training I do. And right now I've started also to add pandemic fatigue training because of the parallels of the loss component with it. And that's something that is obviously very needed. You can also email me at Joanne@griefsolutions.net. You can text me or call me at 757-580-3356. That's 757-580-3356. Find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook.
Thank you. Oh, Fran, you're muted.
Joanne, thank you so much. We want to thank you again for being a guest here at Let's Talk Death and for sharing the inspiration behind your writing and your work. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that very much. And please, everyone, check out on the website the book, We Regret to Inform You, because it's written for a population that very often gets overshadowed by young widows, and that's the parents. The moms and dads of those that have lost their lives in the line of duty. It's a very isolating type of loss for them. So learn more about it there. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I so appreciate it, and it's always a pleasure to work with you and in an environment where we can share the message of helping our surviving family members and helping our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to those who were joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Death. If you would like to learn more about Heal Grief, please visit us at healgrief.org. At healgrief.org, you can learn more about all of the programs and resources of Heal Grief, including our national network of support for grieving young adults called Actively Moving Forward and the AMF app.
And if you are a bereft young adult or adult of any age, you can join our app where individuals are connecting to others experiencing a similar death loss. And last, make sure you sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for links to future episodes of Let's Talk Death.
So with that, again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on Let's Talk Death.